Welcome to our channel. Watch the video until the end. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. From the outside, Japan appears as a high-tech scene with robots everywhere, a virtually non-existent crime rate, a rich culture, and a cutting-edge economy ranking third in the world. Additionally, a healthy population and world-renowned companies contribute to this perception of perfection. However, delving into the reality of Japan, we discover a little-known dark side. Japan consists of 852 islands forming an archipelago with a total area of 378,000 square kilometers, home to about 125 million people. Although this number is considered normal for Asian countries, Japan is surrounded by major powers like China, North Korea, South Korea, and Russia. Within Japanese society, there is a significant percentage of people who have failed to integrate, finding themselves on the margins without access to work, marriage, or a dignified and happy life. They are called the lost generation and represent almost 15% of the population. Their melancholic trajectory is a symbol of Japanese decay and a warning for its sad future. In the 1980s, Japan was seen as the economic superpower destined to surpass the United States and dominate the global scene, similar to what we see today with China. This fear arose after the Japanese miracle, a 3-decade period of phenomenal economic growth fueled by Japan's unique economic system, considered superior to the Western model of the time. This system was based on cooperation between large corporate groups and the Japanese government. These groups, known as keiretsu, were alliances among major Japanese companies that held stakes in each other, working together to strengthen themselves. The major keiretsu were favorably supported by the government through large loans granted by the Bank of Japan, essentially meaning that these alliances had access to unlimited financing for their aggressive foreign expansion, while the government limited the entry of foreign companies into the Japanese market. Although it was not a healthy or fair system, it worked. The Japanese stock market was booming. Japanese products were conquering one market after another, and ordinary people knew that, if they obtained a degree, they could secure a stable job in a large company, meaning job security for life. Japan seemed unstoppable until it wasn't in 1991. After 3 decades of extraordinary growth, Japan became the world's second-largest economy, just behind the United States. With economic growth also came increased property prices and the value of listed companies. By the late 80s, this growth had accelerated further, turning into a true speculative fever. Everyone was convinced that the economic boom and the increase in activity would last forever and that the more one invested, the more one earned. However, one day the bubble burst. During the 90s, the stock market fell by 43%, followed by a drop in property prices. The burst of the bubble meant less money available to spend and a lack of interest in investing in Japanese companies, ending the economic boom. After the bubble burst, the flaws in the Japanese system began to emerge rapidly. Corruption was widespread in companies and the Japanese government, from insider trading to stock manipulation, fraud, and corruption. The unlimited supply of loans had created hundreds of zombie companies that should have failed years earlier, but continued to exist thanks to the cheap money lent by the state. Within a decade, Japan went from being praised as the economic tiger that led the Japanese miracle to being labeled the sick man of Asia. Despite being a significant downturn, it was not an isolated case. The economies of many countries experience highs and lows, but in Japan, the recession had devastating repercussions for an entire generation, with lasting effects for millions of people. The Japanese work culture and hiring practices are intense and unique, with several aspects drastically differentiating it from other job markets in the world. A corporate career in Japan with shukatsu, a particular job hunting ritual that graduates face at the end of their studies, is a challenge. Many companies, including the big keiretsu, hire new graduates only once a year and in large numbers. Candidates must face a series of group interviews and seminars, where thousands of people compete. These practices ensure stability but also create an extremely rigid job market. If you don't find a good job immediately after university, your chances diminish significantly, and once you're in, you're expected to stay with the same company for life. But if you can't follow this path, the doors to most companies will remain closed forever. After the economic bubble of the 90s, many graduates struggled to enter the job market. Companies cut back on hiring, keeping older employees during the economic crisis. Later, when hiring resumed in the new millennium, many graduates from the 90s missed opportunities, giving rise to the lost generation. This generation, now in their 30s and 40s, is struggling to find a foothold in the job market. Many depend on their parents for survival and have not managed to form a family or find stable employment. About 15% of the population, nearly 17 million people, are part of this lost generation. The economic and social situation has led to super-aging of the Japanese population, with almost 30% being elderly. The low birth rate of the lost generation exacerbates the problem. By 2050, it is projected that the number of elderly will nearly match the number of working-age people, making it unsustainable to rely on worker taxes to support the elderly. Another social consequence is represented by the Hikikomori, Japanese men who live in isolation, often in their parents' homes, unable to cope with the pressure and competition of the Japanese work environment. Originally stemming from the lost generation, this phenomenon has extended to younger generations. Hikikomori are a concerning social phenomenon in Japan and represent individuals who choose to live in extreme social isolation, often in their bedrooms or in their parents' homes for extended periods, without significant interactions with the outside world. This behavior is characterized by a complete withdrawal from society and social relationships, going beyond simple desires for solitude or introspection. Hikikomori often struggle to cope with the social pressures and expectations of Japanese society, particularly regarding education, employment, and relationships. For many, isolation becomes a way to escape or respond to these perceived pressures. Living in isolation is a way to avoid facing these challenges and to protect oneself from potential failure or rejection in society. However, this behavior can lead to a cycle of isolation, as the longer a person spends in isolation, the more difficult it can be for them to reintegrate into society. The Hikikomori issue is a concerning problem for Japan, not only for the individual impact on the quality of life and mental well-being of those affected, but also for its broader consequences on society and the economy. The lack of participation in the job market and community can generate significant costs in terms of personal and social development, in addition to posing a challenge for mental health and support systems in the country. The Japanese government and various organizations have sought to address the Hikikomori issue, offering counseling services, psychological support, and social reintegration programs. However, addressing this phenomenon requires holistic approaches and a deep understanding of the complex underlying causes. Raising public awareness and reducing the stigma surrounding Hikikomori are crucial for promoting the acceptance and integration of these individuals into society. A unique response to loneliness has been the increase in interaction with dolls that offer comfort and companionship, meticulously personalized. These dolls, known as love dolls or silicone dolls, are designed with meticulous details to resemble real people, providing comfort and companionship to those facing loneliness or struggling with interpersonal relationships. The popularity of these dolls is linked to several social and cultural factors in Japan. For example, the country faces significant demographic challenges, such as an aging population and a low birth rate. This means there is a growing percentage of people who are single or without a romantic partner, many of whom are seeking alternatives to satisfy their emotional and social needs. Additionally, Japanese culture values discretion and respect for privacy, which may lead some individuals to prefer more controllable and predictable relationships with realistic dolls rather than facing the complexities and uncertainties of relationships. However, it is important to note that the use of these dolls can be viewed with some stigma in Japanese society. While they provide emotional comfort for some, relationships with realistic dolls can be perceived as a form of escapism or as a response to difficulties in building meaningful interpersonal relationships. The phenomenon of realistic dolls reflects changes in contemporary social and emotional dynamics, not only in Japan but in other parts of the world, highlighting the universal human search for connection and intimacy, adapting in unconventional ways to the complexities of modern life and social pressures. The Japanese government recognizes the severe impact of the lost generation and Hikikomori on society and the Japanese economy, announcing measures to help these groups. However, addressing these challenges requires significant changes in work culture and economic policies. The tragedy of the lost generation serves as a warning about the risks of economic and social systems that exclude broad segments of the population. Economic progress must take into account the well-being and inclusion of all community members. As for the future of Japan, addressing these multiple challenges requires support not only from the government but from the entire society. A meaningful and lasting transformation will only be possible with substantial changes in work culture, economic policies, and social programs. Regarding the phenomenon of dolls, it is a symptom of the basic human need for emotional connection, but it also raises questions about evolving social dynamics and the challenges individuals must face in their pursuit of emotional fulfillment. The response to these challenges is not simple and requires a combination of innovative solutions, compassion, and deep understanding of the roots and manifestations of social problems affecting modern society. In conclusion, as Japan faces these significant issues, it is essential to recognize that solutions require a holistic and integrated approach involving all levels of society, from individual citizens to government institutions. Only in this way can we hope to overcome existing barriers and build a more inclusive and resilient society for future generations.